So even though the ceasefire deal was agreed, we are told last night it has not been put into practice yet and has not got through the Israeli cabinet. So it is not there until it is there. That is because we have been here in this position many times over the last few months. Of course, never as close to the ceasefire implementation as we are now, but it appears that there is still this hitch and this wrangling over possibly the names of some of the Palestinian prisoners to be released from Israeli jails. A little earlier, I spoke to our Gaza correspondent Rushdi Abualouf, who is monitoring things from Turkey, and I asked him what he was hearing from his sources in Hamas.
I just got a message from a senior Hamas leader in Doha who called me, and he said, look, we are committed to the ceasefire and what is agreed on the ceasefire and what is announced by the mediators. When I did ask him about this, he said that's all lies, as he said. So he denied that Hamas is trying to make anything in the end. Well, last night I was talking to another Hamas source, and Hamas was hoping to include one or two names that, significant names from the people who served for a long time in the prison, especially that two of the former Hamas military commanders in the West Bank are in the Israeli prison, and Hamas was hoping to release them because they want to fix their, popularity, their reputation. They have lost a great deal of its popularity, Hamas, because many people in Gaza and outside, many Palestinians are equally accusing Hamas of what's happening for the last 15 months. Not all of Palestinians are in favor of the 7th of October attack, but what we are getting from Doha this morning is that Hamas confirmed that they are committed to the ceasefire terms and to what is announced by the mediators. That's what they told the BBC this morning.
Rushdi Abualouf there. Let me just give you a sense of where we are, because this is the very heart of Tel Aviv, and since the 7th of October, as I say, families and relatives of the hostages have been camped out here to put pressure on the Israeli government to reach a deal with Hamas. You can see here the names and faces and ages of many of the hostages that remain, some 98 hostages still in Gaza, and under the ceasefire deal, in the first phase of the ceasefire, 33 would return with batches released every week. This has also been the site of protests, regular protests, weekly protests since the 7th of October and since the war began. You can see over here a simulation, a reconstruction of a tunnel. That is in reference to the hundreds of kilometers of tunnels that Hamas has built through Gaza to smuggle weapons and supplies, and it is thought also to hold some of the hostages. And if you just take a look over here in the distance, you can see there some chairs there in the corner of the square. That is a dinner table set up with an empty chair representing all of the hostages that are not yet back home. Now, let us pick up on some of what the deal recommends and lays out. We can speak to Juliette Tuma, who is Communications Director for UNRWA. That is the United Nations mission for Palestinian refugees that is operating and essential in Gaza. Juliette Tuma, very good to speak to you. Thanks for sparing the time this morning here on BBC News. Just tell us what the ceasefire deal would alleviate in terms of the humanitarian suffering on the ground there.
Thanks for having me, Mark, and good to speak to you too. Look, I mean, there is quite a lot of anticipation, to say the least, for what will happen should this deal come into effect on Sunday noontime in Gaza. And I think everyone is absolutely exhausted in Gaza, so it will bring a bit of respite. What we're also hoping that this will bring is a massive boost of humanitarian supplies and commercial supplies to help the private sector stand back on its feet.
The ceasefire would stipulate 600 trucks of humanitarian supplies getting into Gaza per day, but I imagine that is still a drop in the ocean in terms of the needs on the ground.
Our understanding is that this figure refers to a combination of commercial supplies for the private sector, for the shops, for the markets, humanitarian supplies, indeed, and also fuel, diesel, and gas. So it's a combination of very basic supplies. Having said that, Mark, for background, before the war, Gaza depended on a supply line of 500 trucks every day that used to come via Israel. So there's no reason why we can't back to that level of aid and other basic commercial supplies.
As a reminder to our viewers, your agency, the UN Palestinian Refugee Mission, was banned by the Israeli Parliament last October from operating. A long-running dispute between the two. The Israeli government accusing some employees of UNRWA taking part in the 7th of October attacks. What will you even be able to operate? Will you be able to be part of the equation in post-conflict Gaza if the Israeli government is banning all contact with you and banning your operations?
So to implement such a huge and massive delivery of humanitarian aid, the world is going to indeed need UNRWA, which is the largest humanitarian organization in Gaza right now. You're right, there's been this ban that was introduced by the Israeli parliament that should come into effect by, we think, the 30th of January. So the clock is ticking. And so here's a chance that part of this ceasefire agreement that there will be a reversal of a sort of that ban, and that UNRWA will be able to continue to play its role and provide much needed humanitarian assistance to people in need.
Juliette Touma from UNRWA, thank you very much indeed for bringing us right up to date. So big questions over who would be able still to be able to operate in post-conflict Gaza, and indeed who would be able to run Gaza going forward. That would all be tackled in phase 2 of the ceasefire plan, which would be negotiated in several weeks' time. So some of the thorniest sticking points are still there in the future, and big questions going forward even after the ceasefire comes into place, if indeed it does on Sunday.